Let's see.
Okay.
Oh, I think we are live.
Hi.
And it says these comments and reactions are from viewers on Facebook Live, not all room participants. Okay, cool. So I think people outside of this room are supposed to be able to see it too.
Okay,
It's just
perfect.
to this room.
And just, alrighty.
Yeah. At
Cool.
least that is the hope. And if not, then we will post this afterward.
Yeah.
It'll be a recording.
Yeah.
So hi everybody. Yeah, I think if you caught the first few minutes of the last live attempt, working through some tech issues, but I am here with Viki Simone tonight from Ablevice to talk about her company Ablevice, Costa Rica, sustainability in the tourism industry, and particularly in the wellness and retreat industry. So Viki, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm super excited to share what you're doing
thank you
with
for
us.
having me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you just maybe start and tell us a little bit about yourself and Ablevice?
Yeah, so I've been in Costa Rica for about 2 years now, and I was volunteering at a lot of wellness centers. Costa Rica is like a hub for wellness, all sorts of different healing modalities, massage therapy, yoga, anything in like alternative wellness, you can find it here in Costa Rica. So it's a huge industry here. It's a huge industry within travel in general. Wellness travel is like one of the fastest growing industries that there is, as far as tourism goes. And so I was here working with different, yoga studios, and was realizing that there was a huge discrepancy there was basically an opportunity gap in what I was seeing. So I was seeing a lot of foreign-owned businesses and either locals being employed at like a very low minimum wage, or no locals being employed at these businesses. And so I thought, okay, I'm seeing the gap, I'm seeing the opportunity gap. Is there any way to bridge these two worlds? Because it is such a huge industry, it's not going away. There's a need for it. And it would be great if local communities and local businesses could be more involved with this industry that's coming from, American, European-owned places, and coming into Costa Rica. So it would be great to have this industry be an uplifting economic opportunity rather than sidelining local businesses, local businesses.
Right.
So that's where the idea came from, and yeah.
Did you have a background in travel, or what was kind of your background to precursor this before you decided to like start a business in this field?
Yeah, I've done a lot of traveling. I actually opted out of high school when I was 16, and after I did an exchange program in Chile, and it was just too hard to go back to like the mundane high school routine after, living in a foreign country and experiencing something like that. So I basically, dropped out of high school, got my GED, and pursued different travel opportunities whenever they would come up. Just really dedicated my time to like looking online for different scholarships, anything that I could find. And yeah, and then studied interdisciplinary art in college, and environmental studies a little bit as well. So that's where the sustainability aspect comes in to Ablevice's commitment, and I can talk a little bit more about that as well. But yeah, I have a very long history with travel. I've lived extensively in a lot of different places. So and was exposed to travel outfits that really stress and emphasize responsible travel. So, everything from leaving no trace to cultural diversity training and everything like that. So I was very fortunate that I was exposed to those things before I came to Costa Rica, and was just looking for opportunities here.
Sure, sure. That's so cool. I love that. Yeah. My sister also was not. She didn't travel in high school, but she ended up ending a year early to finish online because she just really wasn't enjoying that environment. So she ended up getting to
Yeah.
start a year early and move to a new place and start her job. So that's cool to hear that that was your experience, kind of getting started in that. Did you travel much before that, your study abroad experience, or was that really like your
No, I
first?
had I had gone on this like volunteer like rugged travel trip to Peru when I was a freshman in high school, and after that, that inspired me to apply for a full exchange program, you know, where you live with a family and you're, you know, a foreign exchange student. So yeah, I had Peru was a place that really opened my eyes to just the limited world I was living in back in the States and how different perspectives, all the wonderful things that travel can do for a person. I was fortunate enough to have that at a young age and travel in some pretty rugged areas of Peru, so that was very cool. And the travel outfit where I get a lot of the diversity training from is called Where There Be Dragons, and they are just really phenomenal. They're extremely socially responsible, culturally responsible, and also environmentally responsible. So a lot of what I'm basing this program on, my travel routes are based in them. So they're a phenomenal company to check out.
Where there be dragons. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll
That's what
definitely.
they used to call areas on the map that were uncharted.
Oh, okay. I love
Yeah.
that. That's fun. So,
Yeah.
yes, tell us a little bit about what Able Vice is and what your business is.
Yeah. So this will be the first program that I'm running, and it's going to take place in early June. June 2nd is the date of this first retreat. And so basically, if you take away every component of a wellness retreat that is solely fixed in the location and that's kind of tied to the retreat center, I'm trying to bridge that out. And rather than resource just from the retreat center, I'm trying to bridge out into the community and bring community members in. And so not only does it provide an opportunity for business, for local individuals, but it also makes for an interconnected experience when people come. Because what I was seeing when I was working for yoga retreats was that it's they're kind of like mini all inclusives, you know, like you go, you're there, you're in the jungle or you're on the beach or you're in the mountains, but you really don't, maybe there's an excursion or something like that, but you really don't get this like culturally connected experience um, with the areas that you're traveling in. And so the idea is to, yeah, create, you know, a very connective experience. And it's also based from the understanding that in wellness, in suffering, in you know all these world problems that we have, they're reflected on an individual level as they are on a global level. So you know it's kind of tricky to just like send yourself away for a week or 2 weeks at a time and try to work on yourself when really the root of our individual problems is systemic, it's global. So
Right.
it's kind of coming from that perspective as well, like connected connective healing.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't make you're not necessarily fixing all the problems that are related to the community aspect if you're just isolating yourself and, not having those interactions at
Yeah,
all.
and I would imagine that on a certain level, it's not very fulfilling either. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
it's maybe very calming and very like, you know, I don't know. I'm sure there's benefits as well, but yeah, and especially coming from an environmental perspective, we know that like our individual suffering is related to the global suffering that's happening. So trying to come from that perspective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think so
Yeah.
much of like, spending so much money to go to a completely different place and not getting to interact with anybody there, and then those places not supporting the local environment, that you're getting to enjoy while you're there. You're not learning
Yeah.
about culture necessarily. So it is kind of it's all about like the individual's experience of calm and luxury and all of that, but not really what that looks like.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard to find like some of these local people that are going to be helping me with the retreat, whether they're surf instructors or local people with cultural, historical knowledge, or environmental consultants, or this like amazing vegan, gluten-free Caribbean chef that I'm working with, an older lady in the community. How are you gonna find that stuff? Like it's so hard to find these little like niche individuals, but those are the gems of this area, and it's so limiting to just go to a place and yeah, like I said, they're kind of like mini all-inclusive. So you miss out on all these cultural gems, which is why we travel to begin with, is to have an
Right.
adventure, to have an authentic experience. So it's also, making it easier for the for my clients to have a truly like enriching experience.
Right. And that's I think why I was so excited to talk with you, because that's kind of what I do on that end. Is like I want to share with people, with my audience, what all of these eco-friendly things are that they can find, where these little gems and these local people that is really difficult to find. And I think it's getting easier as travel blogging and the internet is what it is, and it's easier to find those nowadays. But I think for the average person who's planning a trip like this, like it's a lot of time and work to be able to come up with an
Yeah,
itinerary on your own that includes all of these locals and is benefiting the locals. It takes a lot of
yeah,
research. So, and I don't think oftentimes most of us are even aware of some of those thoughts while we're starting to plan the trip. So being able to find providers like you that are like bringing all of those things together for people is so important. And I'm really hopeful that more tour travel operators will kind of be doing what you're doing.
yeah,
Can
yeah. I
you
hope so as well.
so if people are signing up for your retreat in June, can you talk a little bit about what they should expect and what that's going to look like?
Yeah, so I'm actually at the location where we will be now.
Awesome.
It's a family-run hotel, and this area has a extremely like rich history of like the Afro-Caribbean community, and so the owners here are part of the Afro-Caribbean community and know just like so much. Like this area, you can imagine in the last I was talking to the owner the other day. He's probably in his 60s or 70s, maybe. I mean, he was here when there were no roads, no electricity, talking to me about like 3 day long calypso parties they had when he was a kid, where like someone would just be like drumming on a Fanta bottle, and just, yeah, really interesting family that runs this place. And it's hard to find like family or even locally owned businesses or hotels, I should say, in this area. There's this particular town is unique in that the local community is quite strong, and that's why I chose this place, because it was easier to find locally owned businesses. There's some places in Costa Rica that like, and I'm sure in other tropical parts of the world, that you're hard pressed to find something that's locally owned. It's just the way that like beautiful places have developed. So we'll be here at this hotel. It's called Selvin's Cabinas, and we are about, God, like maybe 300 meters less. It's like less than a minute to the beach. Like the Caribbean Ocean is right there. So we'll have morning movement and meditation classes either on the deck or right at the beach. And then we'll have several lectures peppered in throughout the week. And those will be on this idea of decolonizing travel, and how can we as modern travelers be more, yeah, cognizant of the history of a place, of the current economic impacts of that history, and how that ties into the conservation of an area too, because the entire model of what I'm doing is based on the idea that communities, and this is fairly new in conservation, there have been a lot of mistakes made in the conservation paradigm and strategy, and they're realizing now that communities that have strong ties to the environment, the nature around them, are like what's upholding our ecosystems around the world. That those communities, actually, by uplifting those communities, your environmental impact goes really far. So we'll be talking about things like that while, you know, just de-stressing and like creating a space that's extremely just like peaceful, educational, explorations. And I mean, there's so many beautiful things around this area. So the week includes a trip to this area is home to like chocolate. So there's a lot of chocolate growers. I'm on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica.
Okay.
So it's quite famous for chocolate production. So we'll be doing a cacao tour with an indigenous community up in the mountains. And yeah, I think we'll be doing an excursion. We're kind of like sandwiched in between two national parks. So we'll be doing an excursion to one of the national parks. So yeah, you can just imagine a week filled with and the meals. They'll all vegan, all gluten-free meals cooked by this woman. Her name's Doña Veronica, and she has a farm here, so we'll be checking out her farm as well. She's into plant medicine, like spiritual healing, stuff like that, and she's kind of like an elderly like figure in the community that's very well known. So yeah, just interacting with some pretty cool characters and just de-stressing the system.
That sounds like an amazing week. I'm in Indiana right now, and I have not been close to an ocean in a really long time. So
oh man,
that sounds amazing. What's the group size that you're looking for?
Right now, it's quite small. It's just 9 people.
Cool. And do you have a limit just for people that might be watching and want to
Yeah, it's 9 for right now.
Okay, cool.
So that may expand in the future, but I really do like the smaller group sizes. If it gets more, like it might be like 12 or 13, but I mean, I've worked at some of these yoga places that have 20, 30 people over for a week, and it's just like, it's crazy. Like I mean, people sign up for those things. I don't think they understand what they're getting themselves into. Yeah, it ends up not being the most like relaxing experience. So I definitely really appreciate the small group size model.
Yeah, I've seen some retreat itineraries that like almost give me a little anxiety because it seems like so much like really intense stuff throughout the day in big groups like that. And yeah, so if someone is interested in joining one of your trips, the best way would be like get on your mailing list so that they get notified for upcoming programs.
I don't have a mailing list yet. Okay. I'm sure once I run this first one, like I will be marketing a lot more, but I'm not doing a whole lot of marketing right now, just like little things like this. But yeah, just email me directly, and or I'm posting on like a third-party site right now where they can just like put down a deposit immediately. So, but yeah, for your viewers, like the best way is to just get in touch with me directly.
Okay, cool. And everybody, yeah, I think the link might be up here, but I'll post it in the comments too when I reshare. It's ablevice.com is where you can find Viki. And if you're watching this and you can't find her, just shoot me a message and I'll connect you to her. So this is your first trip and you're kind of just getting started into this. Where do you see Ablevice going? What would you like it to look like in a couple years from now?
So there's a couple ways I see it going, and one is like me stepping back completely and just acting as the entire company, just acting as like kind of a stitching. Like we come in, we make these connections. Right now, I'm providing the movement and the meditation classes. So maybe if the accommodation and the tour guide and the indigenous guide and some other people wanted to run their own thing, like that would be really ideal, is so that we are a company that's creating connections. And but I also just see, you know, that could happen in combination with me continuing to run educational retreats in different areas or in just this area. I don't know, like I could see myself doing them once a month or once every so often. I think the demand is definitely there. So I'm just gonna kind of wait and see how it goes and see, work off the feedback of my clients, the feedback of the locals I work with, and see how things go.
Awesome. Oh, that's
But always like an educational experience. Like that's one thing. Looking into the future, I'm like, okay, like what could go wrong? Like you always see these things like extrapolate and like things grow out of hand. And I've seen it with wellness practitioners. I've seen it with yoga practitioners who like they start off as like these peaceful, like, you know, yoga teachers, and they just are making money, and now they have 20, 30 people coming in, $3,000 per person. They're making, God, I don't know, like 60 something grand a month, and they're just exploding. Like there's just their business is growing faster than they can maintain what their original morals and their original goals were. So when I look into the future, I'm like, okay, like what could, like, is there, you know, in the wellness industry, it is so fast growing right now. Like I think that's something you have to be aware of. And so just really wanting to maintain the integrity of the original principles of what I'm trying to do with this, and not just becoming another wellness retreat, not just becoming another tour outfit.
Do you have any insights into why, like, the wellness industry in particular? I know I was just looking into just travel in general, and like 1 in 10 jobs is in the travel and tourism industry across the world right now. It's growing faster than, you know, any other sector than in the economy for the past like 9 or 10 years.
Yeah.
Maybe COVID aside, but why the wellness industry in particular? Do you know?
I don't know exactly. I'm sure there's a lot of there's probably a lot of theories. Working in like, I wouldn't say I work in the spiritual sector, but wellness and spirituality, spiritual tourism, as like you may hear it called in academia, is something to consider when looking at that. I think people seek experiences now more than ever. I was reading something that was like millennials will invest more in experiences than any other generation, and so we're a huge population. And so, yeah, I think we're looking for experiences, and we want, I mean, also travel, not necessarily wellness travel, but travel in general. I think social media has a huge role in its popularity, unfortunately, because there's a lot of drawbacks to a population that just wants to go to a location for, you know, a photo or something like that. But I think that's probably a significant influence in why people want to go to places. And I hear people all the time in my sphere. I mean, they jump from Costa Rica to Bali to Thailand to Mexico. And to me, like, that's not responsible travel. That's not sustainable travel. It's just like, I don't know, it's this hype, and it's so easy. Like, and then probably flights have gotten a lot cheaper lately. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's taken on a different tone for sure in the last since I started traveling.
Yeah, absolutely. I know social media is a big one, and you see the trends of the places where people take the same photo every time, and then you see some of the unedited versions where it's like that isn't even really there. That's a reflective pool that everybody's taking. It's like it's so distorted. I think some of
Yeah.
the reasons why people go to a place and what makes it beautiful, and then when you slap a filter on it, it's like people aren't really aware of what they're going for, and
Yeah.
that's
And the popularity of a place actually extremely changes its topography. It changes its environmental impact. Like a lot of these areas, they're not meant to house thousands of people. Like I was just reading an article about Manuel Antonio. It's a extremely popular destination here in Costa Rica. And with the popularity in ecotourism, the ecosystem changed there. Like there was species loss and terrain changing and everything. So people are definitely studying the impact of like ecotourism specifically.
Hmm. So
And yeah.
you talked a little bit earlier too about how it's difficult to find local tour providers, travel like businesses. Is that correlated to, the influx of kind of immigrants from Western countries? A lot of like people going and moving
Yeah.
in their own retreats, like pushing people out, or maybe can you speak to the dynamic of like why that's difficult? Because I know it's not just Costa Rica either, where it's like this is the case in a lot of places.
Yeah, I have an entire research page actually on my website where I've just gathered different articles on this topic. And ecotourism, I was just reading that contrary to this idea that it's going to support locals, it doesn't. Like, there's several reasons why it doesn't, which like I don't exactly remember. They're in the articles, but yeah, I don't know. From what I see, you come into a lot of places in Costa Rica and it's just I mean, some places you don't even see any Costa Ricans.
Hmm.
So and I think it takes people a minute to like think like, wait, where are all the locals? Like where did
Right.
they go? And you go to the next town over that's like incredibly impoverished, and that's where they are. It's gentrification basically is what has happened because prices go up, like goods go up, gas goes up, everything takes on a different value when there's tourism involved. And so I was talking to a taxi driver the other day, and I'm like, where do you shop? Like, there's no way that you can sustainably like live, make like with what I'm paying you for this drive and what I pay at the grocery store. There's no way like this is like working out very well for you. And he's like, yeah, we have to be very resourceful. We have to go to specific places to buy certain things. So yeah, it's gentrification in I mean, I don't know if that would be like the technical term, but it's definitely like pricing out the local people.
Right.
So that's part of the reason why it's hard to find local businesses. It's not impossible. I'm not saying that. And Costa Rica is you can find local businesses. It's not, but most of them are, and the biggest ones are foreign owned. So yeah, it just happens like this area on the other coast, on the Pacific side, an extremely popular area called Santa Teresa, um, just had this snowball effect of foreigners coming in, foreign investors, people. I was talking to another local friend there, and he was like the people who used to live on this land, they now are the gardeners for these people. And like he was just reflecting on how quickly everything happened and how sad it was to see people sell their land for so cheap, not understanding what was going to happen. So I guess therein lies another reason why it's harder to find local businesses is just they sold their land because when someone comes in offering you this huge chunk of money, you don't really understand like its value at the time.
Right. And
It,
systematically,
it
like what's going on.
yeah, it snowballs. It makes this like economic, yeah, rippling out over the years. And yeah, this area specifically is quite unique. But I would say that like most popular areas in Costa Rica, I mean, they're all European, Canadian, American-owned businesses. Not all, okay, not all of them, but most of them, and especially the places that attract the most luxury
Right.
vacationers.
And I would, from my experience, part of that too is a small business just doesn't have as much visibility online sometimes. That's a primary way that people are finding things. So when you get these companies and businesses coming in that have tons of money to invest in advertising and showing up on the first page of Google, it's even if you've got some sort of online presence, it's very difficult to um, outperform some of the foreign investors and companies that have a lot more capital to market to
Yeah,
tourists. So
absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's probably for travelers planning out their itinerary from home. Yeah, that's probably the main hurdle is how do you even like find some of these people? And that's another thing when I was first like brainstorming this whole idea, I was thinking of just before I thought of like hosting things myself, I was like, what if I just made an online platform of different key figures? But then it was kind of hard to figure out, like, okay, if any given traveler wants to come and interact with this person, like that's kind of hard to like set up. So, but yeah, I would love to have like a profile of these different people, and maybe if individuals don't necessarily want to go on a retreat, a wellness retreat, I can still connect them with some amazing people in different areas.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's kind of my hope. And have my global directory, so I've got a page for each country where I'm compiling resources on how to
Oh,
plan
nice.
trips. I really want to be pulling in more eco providers there, eco sites, all of the like tips and articles and kind of how to do that. But I feel like so much we have to communicate with each other, and that's the only
Yeah,
way that people will be able to find these things is sharing all of these connections we have and all of these resources
absolutely.
we
And
found.
doing your research ahead of time, and like I said before, I know it's, which is why I want to provide this service. I know it's tricky for people to, dump so much time into researching a trip. But for example, there's a tour company here. They're completely nonprofit, and they hire, actually like train high school students to give walking tours of the area, and they're just like an amazing foothold in the community. And they haven't had enough funding, they haven't had enough visibility, and they're like, struggling to stay afloat right now. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of people just don't know about them.
Right.
So
Would love that sort of thing. Yeah,
yeah.
and I think as we're getting more, sustainability is becoming more popular, it is something that people are seeking out or would choose if they had the choice. I don't think most people are wanting a detached experience necessarily. It's just
Yeah,
not seeing an alternative option or even being kind of aware of there being a choice.
exactly. I think that's I think they're not aware of that there is a choice, that there is an alternative, and in some areas there really isn't an alternative. Some of these areas are just completely overrun. I guess not overrun, but like, yeah, you could use that word,
Right.
by foreign economy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, I always say like you have an impact when you travel, no matter what you do. So it's about kind of figuring out what impact you're making and figuring out how you can shift that to be more positive. And it looks different in every place because yeah, I spoke with a woman who's got an eco campsite in Spain, and in her region of Spain, she's like, there's just not eco-friendly practices. Like we don't have the recycling, we don't
Mm,
a lot of the transportation. I mean, even in the United States, like we don't have some of the trains cross country
yeah.
that has. So what sustainability looks like here can look really different. And I guess sometimes that assessment can be uncomfortable because you might be looking at a place you really want to go to and realize like they're not supporting the tourists that are going there right now. Like
Mm-hmm.
places like Barcelona, Venice are like, please stop coming here. We can't support this number of people.
Yeah.
And then when you do know that that's the case, like what what decision do you make as a traveler? Do you not go to those destinations anymore? Can you do it sustainably? So
Yeah.
I don't have the answers to those, but I think that's a kind of moral dilemma that we're starting to see as that
Right. And
is.
another thing I would add to that list of questioning is, what am I going to learn from going to this area? If sustainability is one of the things, if you're an individual that you're looking at sustainability and your environmental impact when you're traveling, then that's clearly an important thing for you in your life.
Right.
So not only how sustainable can I be on an individual basis, but if you go somewhere that doesn't practice recycling, or maybe they don't even have a waste management system, how is that going to influence your perspective, and how it might broaden your perspective? So um,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say, necessarily limit yourself to places that only practice sustainability in the way that we would all like to, but how is
Right.
this going to color my lens, and like help guide my experience, and help me be a more innovative individual when it comes to sustainability and
I
your
love
environmental impact? Yeah, because I think one of your previous questions was, when we spoke before, was, what is what might be some things that people get wrong about sustainable travel. And I think that one of them might be, it's like, you know, it's a very here, like my clothes, my consumables, my trash, my waste. Traveling is it's extremely hard to be zero waste. Like a lot of the things, just water sometimes in some areas, like you have to consume plastic bottles in some areas. And actually now they make some pretty cool like filter straws that you can drink like out of a puddle and basically have it filtered. But so there's that bubble here. There's like the individual bubble. How are all my products and everything I'm using contributing to my environmental impact? But then there's like the larger sphere too. It's like, okay, how is this experience going to better my understanding of the ecological crisis?
Right. Yeah. And I know that I've talked to people before too who've mentioned, like pointed out rather, that a lot of the destinations that do have sustainability really accessible in the way that we might be more accustomed to tend to be places that already have a lot of money to invest in those things. And it's not only visiting the places that already have it figured out isn't solving the problem either. These other communities need the resources, especially where tourism is a huge part of the economy, to be able to create more sustainable infrastructure. So I think you're totally right. It's not no, we can't visit these spots anymore, but well, what are we trying to get out of it, and how do we approach it in a way that's that is meeting our goals, whether that's zero waste or getting to know the culture or whatever that,
or being the tourist that that asks for paper instead of styrofoam. I was that person. I was going to local markets. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much plastic here. And then I thought, what if we just made a campaign and modified these, like some of these vendors who want to use glass, they want to use paper. What if we could, raise the money to do that? And so, it's extremely inspiring. Like, I know that a lot of environmental problems can feel hopeless, and they can feel like, oh my God, like what are we going to do? But I would always encourage someone to approach things with a problem solving mindset. Like every time I come from the capital city on the way down here, I pass probably 3 hours of conventional banana plantations, and I've seen the planes go over spraying pesticides like all over the place, and you see the communities dotted in between that are extremely impoverished and most definitely suffering from health effects from those pesticides. It's one of, like, bananas is one of the worst. I mean, a lot of fruit in general uses a lot of pesticides, but I had a friend that was on the bus ride with me recently, and she was so hopeless about it. And I would encourage any given traveler to, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, use your journey as an educational experience. And okay, how can we, if it is this way, what is, how can I carry this information with me to further my impact?
I love that. I'm just thinking about that in your particular banana situation, like what that might look like. But having seen that, that's something that you could then come home and have a conversation about what
exactly
you're eating at home and how you can make more sustainable choices. And has nothing to do with changing it in Costa Rica in that moment, but you might be able to even just changing your own where you buy fruits or fair trade bananas, or things like that.
And I think what's striking about seeing environmental impact on the ground when you travel is you understand this social component that exists within the entire environmental crisis, and the more we understand like how humans are being impacted, the more we can work to solve these problems. It's not just organic pesticides, or it's not just like regenerative farming. There's a whole lot more that we need to unlearn and relearn throughout this process of ecological transformation. And I guess not transformation, but healing. And yeah, travel is going to open a lot of those possibilities of understanding that this is not a simple problem, and the human element is extremely intertwined in that. And that's going to be where like the lectures get into guiding people on that, and also giving people resources, podcasts, you know, all sorts of things for when they go home so that they can further look into the things that they saw here. Because everyone who comes to this retreat is going to see, you know, the massive pesticide use on the way down and what that looks like in real life.
Right, right.
So I want to also be able to give people the tools to debrief and process what they're experiencing.
Yeah. As I've been kind of creating this like course that I'm building, teaching people how to plan a trip, it's dawned on me how much of the sustainability part of a trip really happens, I think, before and after, because when you're there, there's a finite number of things you can do, and it's more your eco-friendly habits and those things, but it's the choices that you're making before you even go, like where you're booking, where you're going, where you're staying, who your tour operator is. And then as you're just talking about all of this information that you get from your trip and those experiences, bringing that back home, that's when you really get to apply all of that kind of information. So I think that's a good point, that as people who are interested in eco travel, we shouldn't necessarily be approaching it from the view of like, okay, I'm going to a place, how can I change the environment and change what they're doing here to be more eco-friendly? Because we almost always don't have all the information of a region and all the different,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been the major downfall of conservation for years. It still is trying to fix the problem from a limited perspective. And now you see people getting into the mindset changes that need to happen for us to even understand our environmental impact. Of a huge movement right now is understanding cultures that have maintained a sustainable relationship with the environment for thousands of years. And so yeah, that's extremely important. And this idea that okay, if I do this, this, and this, my environmental impact is going to be significantly reduced, and all these things. That's great, and it's like in the right direction. But there's so much like wider spread conceptual change that needs to happen, and the more we are aware that like nature and the environment isn't this separate thing, that we're all part of this one thing, and whether you recycle or you compost or whatever you do, as long as you are having a more interconnected relationship with the environment, you see the effects physically within wellness and in the body, and you see the effects mentally as well. So it's really interesting to go to places where you have the ability to see communities that have an extremely interconnected relationship with their environment. I have a friend here, and he can spot a sloth like anywhere. Like I don't know how. Like he grew up here. He grew up in the jungle, and like literally when he was little, him and his friends would walk through the jungle, and they would like to see if something was edible or not. They would like touch it to their tongues and like see how they reacted. So of course, when you're younger, like you're a lot more like in tune. Like kids have like a different flavor profile, different palate. So that's how he would explore the jungle. And yeah, growing up here, he's so in tune, he's so connected with the ecosystem that's around him that he can spot a sloth from like literally anywhere. So it's really inspiring, and that's something that I found in my travels in more rugged areas as well, is just like this relationship with nature that we just are not exposed to for the most part, at least in the realm that I grew up in the United States. Little bits, like having access to the forest, having access to the beach, the ocean, something like that, but just not in the day-to-day lifestyle way that you experience in some other parts of the world.
Yeah, it's more like going for a couple-hour hike or taking a trip to the ocean for vacation. Not like living with nature and understanding that. Yeah.
Yeah, and as a part of it, I mean, I was listening to this podcast the other day that I would highly encourage your subscribers to check out. It's called For the Wild, and it's
For the
really
wild.
beautiful. It's awesome, and an indigenous leader, and I think he's a professor in a university in California. He was saying that his language has no word for nature. Like there is no separation. It's just like everything that's all around us. There's no separate entity. That's actually an incredibly modern like idea, is that we're doing one thing over here and nature's doing its thing over there. Like no, it's all connected, and everything that we're doing is obviously affecting the environment, the ecosystem that we live in. So being exposed to people like that, or people who just different perspectives, that's going to go farther, so much farther than anything you could do in your regular routine.
Right. So I guess wrapping it up a little bit, what would you suggest to people that are trying to plan a trip, whether, maybe specifically a wellness retreat or something else? What are some things that you would recommend they look out for if they're trying to build something more like what you've planned for your program, that's empowering the community or connecting with them so they're not so siloed? And
so there are not a whole lot, but I know of one yoga farm in Costa Rica that has a social mission as well. I would look for places that have a social mission, because that's going to be a place that's, again, not getting this like narrow-minded view of sustainability, and understanding that uplifting the community is going to be what uplifts the environment. So keeping that in mind in general, being aware of greenwashing just in general, like whether it's a permaculture retreat. Permaculture is like a huge, I guess, contradictory thing that you see in Costa Rica right now, because it's the same. It's like any wellness retreat. They've just become pockets of wealth, and like very little, if any, of that is actually spread into the community. And yeah, it's great. We can have, an organic permaculture farm in this 10-hectare area that's doing just fine. But if that's not rippling out into the community, and the community around them is just like continuing to I don't know, like be sidelined, then that's not actually the best environmental impact. So I think being aware of greenwashing in general, even in like some things that sound so sustainable, like permaculture or regenerative agriculture, stuff like that. And trying to interact with people from a different culture as much as possible. Whether you're a budget traveler traveling in hostels, doing that extra little thing that's going to expose you to someone from a different area, because ultimately that's really what's going to be the most impactful for your perspective and your worldview. And I would also say one thing I learned volunteering, especially in Central America, is the whole volunteer paradigm. It displaces Central American workers. So if that's something that you're looking into, because 2 years ago, even when I was young and naive, I wanted to curate people's volunteer experiences. I wanted to show people how I was traveling for so cheap and being able to see all these beautiful places. And it took one phrase from someone at a market. I was like, "Do you offer any volunteer opportunities?" And he was like, "Volunteering, takes jobs away from local people." And I was like, whoa, I had never thought of it like that. But actually, you're just supporting a business that gets free labor. And when there's people like down the street who are homeless and need jobs or looking for jobs. So like taking volunteering with a grain of salt, and I'm sure you're aware of a bunch of products and different things that can make your trip more sustainable. So there's always that. And
there's a really
minimalist.
I was going to say, there's a really good book. It's called Service Learning: The Essentials of Volunteering Abroad. That's that gets into all of that, of like the issues with volunteering,
Yeah.
all of those dynamics, and it's not saying, you know, don't volunteer, but if you are going to volunteer, here are all the things you need to know.
Yeah.
And really, like, understanding the impact that has.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a mission trip in high school with my church in Jamaica, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until, you know, years later, I kind of had the sense while we were there that, like, I'm not really helping much. Like, I'm not,
Yeah.
but it wasn't until years later that I really kind of started getting into this and seeing the research, and like, oh, it's actually part of a bigger systemic thing where, no, these sort of trips really aren't doing much with high school.
Yeah.
In those rocks that we moved up a hill, like, they could have hired people with the money
Yeah.
that we paid for our flights to probably have the church.
But maybe the experience was so valuable for you though that it did make an impact, but it's just going with the premise that
Right.
you can make a difference, is what is being done away with like your average volunteer programs, although I like do not, um, I mean, there's a lot that like I'm exposed to by researching conservation and researching cultural diversity and being exposed to those worlds. Like, the world is not every volunteer program is aware of what you're talking about. So understanding
Right.
that as well. It's like, and I found that among friends who have also traveled here, through the volunteer program. They're like, I can't believe how behind these people are with this, whether it's with conservation or with the great white hope mindset of like, let's, go and save the poor countries. Like,
Yeah.
just because we're aware of it as people who are interested in this type of thing does not mean that the world at large is aware of those phenomenon. So yeah,
Yeah.
but and also just keep researching and keep looking into and keep talking to different people. It's incredibly beneficial when you're traveling.
Yeah. Research is the key word. I think that's
Yeah.
something that most people probably don't want to hear, but unfortunately, I think it's an essential part if you're really interested in making sure that your travels or your volunteering.
Yeah, unless you have like 3 months to work with. If you have like 3 months where you're just putting on a backpack and going to Central America, you'll probably be more likely to find an authentic experience just by setting that intention out. But if you need, a work break or you're going on vacation, you have 1 or 2 weeks to work with, like, yeah, you definitely want to be able to curate an authentic experience or a semi-authentic experience for yourself. But I wouldn't be where I am today if I had researched more. I came to Costa Rica like someone invited me to work at a yoga center, and so it took me to go through all this process to know that like there is so much to research about responsible travel. So yeah, I would say it's like depends how much time you have on your hands, because if you have a lot of time, there's so much you can learn on the ground.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point too, that we all are learning and constantly learning new things, and it's shifting all the time. So this isn't like about guilting yourself over things you've done, but just, yeah, trying to learn and improve, because I'm sure that I know that there's still things that I could do to be more sustainable in every trip, and there probably always will be. And definitely done a lot of things that I'm like, oh, maybe I wouldn't do that again. But yeah, like you said, have learned a lot about it, and sometimes those are the things that open your eyes to learning more about those topics or
Yeah,
issues. Like, oh, after you've had an experience that you feel a little off about, it's like, oh, now I'm gonna go look up all this information, and those
yeah,
kind of things can teach you through experience. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
absolutely. And it's again, like for individual travelers, it's so hard to, at home you have your bulk store, or where you can get certain things. When you're traveling, you can only carry so much with you, so like you're bound to create more waste than you would when you were at home, if you were at home. So yeah, like it's a tricky thing, but I'm glad that people like you are looking into it and making it easier for people to have a sustainable journey, and what that means on a larger scale as well.
Yeah, likewise. I'm so excited to hear about Able Vice and similar providers. So I'm really hopeful that we'll have so many more of these
Yeah.
years. But is there
Yeah,
anything
you'll have to come on one at some point.
I would love to? I'm, waiting for this COVID vaccine, and then I'm
Yeah.
out in the world. Is there anything else that you want to share about Abelweiss, about sustainability, Costa Rica?
Um,
Final thoughts?
yeah, I just reiterating that it's there's a lot of unlearning and relearning we have to do right now. We're finding that with the ecological crisis, with social responsibility and social activism. So I would just, yeah, encourage people to have an open mind and a loose itinerary and look for an authentic experience. One phrase that rings in my mind, like working on in these at some of these yoga retreat places, and I was talking to a young woman, and she was like, well, I'm going to do Guatemala and I'm going to do Costa Rica and then I'm going to go do Bali, and not, like, just the phraseology, like understanding that like we come from like a mindset of people who colonized the entire world. And so like we're not going to have naturally just within our linguistics the most responsible, the most sustainable, the most like holistic or connective way to go about things, and just really starting to look at the ways in which we can unlearn just common behavior like that. So once you start doing that, you'll be able to have like such a more expanding experience when you travel. So just taking a look at, just questioning, being critical of the mindset that we're coming from before we embark on a journey.
Learning and unlearning. I like that. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. This was awesome. I really
Yeah, thank
hope
you.
that I can join one of your trips soon. But again, it's Abelweiss, ABLEVICE.com.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone's wanting to go check it out. And thank you so much, Viki. I really appreciate
Yeah,
coming on
thank
and
you.
talking with you. All
Yeah, no problem. It's a pleasure.
right. We'll talk soon. Bye,
Yep, I'll see
everybody.
you later. Bye bye.